I have a little confession to make. Part of me, a very small part of me, is actually looking forward to the release of Bloodlines 2. Now, you may ask yourself why that's the case. I am very, very, very skeptical of this title, to be perfectly honest. But the reason for this is, in large measure, the reason for this video. It is the power of nostalgia. It is the power of the nostalgia trap. You see, no matter how hard or long I think about this matter, I just come back to the fact to me that part of me is genuinely looking forward to the release of this title. And so much of this has to do with just pure nostalgia. The euphoria, the feeling of appreciation I have when I first played Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Even the appreciation of the time it emerged in, the early mid-2000s. A better time to be alive in many respects, I would argue. And I just can't seem to get rid of that feeling. I just cannot seem to overcome that tiny sliver of me that is whispering in my ear that maybe, just maybe, part of this game, maybe even a good part of this game, could be good and could reinvoke those feelings in me. Those feelings I had in the days of yore. Now, this, of course, is not specifically just applicable to Vampire Bloodlines 2, by no means. It's a general principle. It's a principle that really bites us in the buttocks sometimes as gamers, because those of us, especially those of us who are older, have this tendency to sort of look back to the good old days wistfully and think, those were good games. And oftentimes they were, in fact, good games. But as much as we can try to be objective about things and try to sort of cut through the din of modernity, we still have a part of ourselves that we struggle to completely block out. And that's the part that is hopeful. That's the part that tells us, despite all the red flags, and there are many in Bloodlines 2, we still want to appreciate and enjoy this game. So I'm honest, there's a part of me that is absolutely looking forward to the release of this title. It's a small part, though, because the red flags are many, as I said. But in general, this principle of nostalgia, what I've come to call the nostalgia trap, really gets us in the buttocks, as I've said many, many times over. In fact, I don't think that the game that was released last year, almost a year ago, Dragon Age The Veilguard, would have been as catastrophic as it in fact was, had it not been some connective tissue to the past, the connective tissue to the Dragon Age IP, the good old days, the days of yore. And whether it's Dragon Age Inquisition, which I thought was okay, it was not good or bad, it was just okay, or Origins, which was really the only Dragon Age title that really stood out amongst all the titles, there was still that attempt to tap into that spirit of those days bygone. And that only amplified the disappointment when Dragon Age The Veilguard came out in all its glory, in all its, well, how should I put this, ineptitude, in all its political messaging, in all its horror. That was a big part of it. Because that game would have been crap if it had just stood on its own, there's no question. But the fact that it was A, connected to the good old days of Dragon Age Origins in some way, shape, or form, and B, was the final entry to the IP, the saga of Dragon Age, the explicator of all the lore, the explicator of all the things that had occurred. That was the nail in the coffin. Had it been a standalone game, yeah, would have sucked, for sure. People would have laughed at it. People would have moved on as well. Nobody would have had this negative nostalgic effect that I'm still feeling to this day every time I think of Dragon Age The Veilguard. An abomination upon the face of gaming. An abomination upon the face of something that was once so good and so inspiring and so well thought out. You can see where I'm going with this. It's true, nostalgia can make you look forward to things. A great deal, in fact. Even if it's self-deception. But the fallout from nostalgia is even worse. The fallout is painful. It makes you feel a sense of remorse far greater than any game standing on its own without nostalgia could have ever accomplished. And that's the problem. We as human beings tend to these nostalgic feelings about the past, about games we used to enjoy and how good they were. But here's another element to throw into the mix. And this is perhaps an even more depressing element. when it comes to nostalgia. Oftentimes, as we are enraptured by feelings of nostalgia, we attempt to return to the past by playing these old games. And we play them, and they fail to ensorcel us and entrance us in the same way that they once did. Sure, nominally, maybe they're still not bad, and sure, maybe they're still even good experiences overall, but that powerful feeling of emotion you once felt, it's not there anymore. You're trying to relive an experience that is long gone. And that's the problem. You see, this is broader than just gaming, although it certainly applies to gaming. When we think back to the past of our own lives, when we delve into the nostalgia of our own lives, we often forget that nostalgia is highly contextual. So, for example, given my antiquity, I was in my 30s when I was playing the Mass Effect series. And there were certain things going on in my life, certain people in my life, certain events in my life. And all of these things coalesced into a bundle of a particular set of feelings that I then somehow, subconsciously, had integrated into my Mass Effect experience. It made the entire Mass Effect experience more emotional. I felt more connected to it, more connected to the characters, and so on and so forth. And so too does this hold for every gaming experience of your life that you have an emotional attachment to. Not just gaming, other experiences, general experiences in your life. Certainly other fictional things you might have read in the form of books, movies you might have watched at some point in time. We fail to realize in the current incarnation of ourselves that our incarnation back then was a different human being existing in a different sphere, so to speak. And that's where, as I've said, nostalgia really comes to nip us in the buttocks. Because it is quite literally impossible to recapture the particular circumstances of that particular point in time where you thought, wow, what an amazing game, this gave me the feels, or this gave me the sense of achievement or accomplishment, or what a masterpiece. However, or whatever you might have felt back then with respect to any game, going back playing it and feeling, well, I don't know what I was thinking back then, or this game just doesn't recapture the same feelings of old that I used to have, or looking forward to new titles that unfortunately cannot live up to your nostalgic expectations. All of this is a trap. And I'm not saying that we should get rid of our feelings of nostalgia, at least not entirely. It's a part of the human experience, as it were. Sometimes a very negative one, sometimes a very destructive one, but it is nonetheless a part of that experience, and sometimes even slightly positive. Sometimes nostalgia can boost and amplify our feelings towards things. But particularly in the gaming world, with so many flops, so many disappointments, I think nostalgia has become increasingly dangerous. Now, from a marketing point of view, there's no doubt that nostalgia sells. It probably sells better than copulation, to be honest. Recently, Bethesda, in conjunction with another studio, put out a remake of Oblivion in the Unreal Engine. And that game, by all accounts, sold like hotcakes. Now, I played a little bit of the Oblivion remake, and frankly speaking, I was not that impressed, but tons of people were. A hearkening back to the past, the glories of Bethesda when Bethesda was still glorious. And mind you, not just old fogies, not just older people who had enjoyed the game when it came out at the time, but also younger people who were not even alive at the time of Oblivion's release, or were simply too young to really appreciate it. They too bought into the legend of nostalgia because they heard all the stories. Wow, I can finally experience this game in a modern setting, as it were, vis-a-vis Unreal Engine. I can finally experience this game in a way that doesn't visually turn me off and disgust me. That is what they heard, and so they dove in, and apparently they enjoyed it. So nostalgia sells. But at the end of the day, what I'm essentially trying to say is that we need to be on guard. We need to be on guard against these feelings of nostalgia because they can blind us, they can corrupt us, and they can mislead us. It's not always bad. Sometimes nostalgia is good, like I said. But more often than not, especially in the gaming world, we allow ourselves to be manipulated by these feelings of nostalgia, which then consequently lead to even greater feelings of disappointment. And mind you, it's going to be really difficult because this is part of our nature as human beings. Nostalgia is part of who we are. And as I've said, there are plenty of studios, and will be plenty of studios, that will release remakes, remasters, all in an attempt to rekindle that feeling that you think you might have had at the time, which was very, very peculiar and particular to that moment of time in your life, as opposed to any other time in your life. For reasons beyond your comprehension, ultimately, the amalgamation of tiny little events, people you knew, relationships you were in, your work circumstances, your health, all of these things contribute to that feeling of nostalgia. But you cannot recapture it ultimately. It was a different time. And games that fail to live up to that nostalgia hype will devastate you all the more. As I've said, the worst thing about Dragon Age The Veilguard was that it was both symbolically and factually part of something greater that at one point in time we all truly appreciated. Now, Bloodlines 2 will be releasing in a week, and I plan on playing it. But I will be approaching this game with a feeling of guarded nostalgia and a hefty dose of skepticism. I, of course, will let you know what I think about the game when I've finished it. I plan on making a proper review to let you know whether it's worth it or not. But regardless of how the game turns out, I know that it will probably, almost certainly actually, fail to recapture that feeling I once had over 20 years ago. Something that we should be aware of. But in any event, as always, thank you for tuning in. And if you like my videos and you like my takes, you can leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe. It's much appreciated, as it really helps out my channel. And I will check you out next time. You take care.